A little more than a week ago, Charlene, my wife, and I celebrated our 33rd wedding anniversary. We've been married 33 years, and as a part of that celebration, we went up to Spokane and we did some different things up there. We went to dinner at a restaurant that I've been to before, but I've been wanting to take Charlene to. It's a restaurant that a friend of mine owns, Peter Frazee, and it's called Gander and Ryegrass. Shout out to Gander and Ryegrass. Hey, if you get a chance to go there, you really should. It's a great place. It's a really fun place. But we chose a meal that was a 3-course option. And what was really interesting about it is that there were 2 entree choices, only 2. It didn't take a lot of time for us to decide. It was really kind of nice. It was really nice to be able to sit down to dinner, not spend a lot of time trying to decide what we were going to eat. You know, we live in a culture where we have so many choices. And I'm just curious, in the past week, have you or somebody in your family, or maybe as a family, have you said, what are we going to have for dinner? You know, what should we have for dinner? What should we have for breakfast tomorrow? Or what should we have for lunch today? We spend a lot of time trying to decide what we're going to eat. And here's another question. Have you spent any time over the last week? Maybe this morning, maybe today, you started by saying, I wonder what I should wear. What should I wear to work? Or what should I wear to this meeting? Or what should I wear to this event? Maybe been struggling a little bit with just life, and life is kind of on the edge of a knife sometimes. You don't know, how it's going to go and how long it's going to last, and maybe you've had some health issues that have caused some anxiety for you and wondering about, how life's going to go for you in the world. We live in a world where we think about and worry about many different things, and I shared some of those concerns, some of those worries, some of those anxieties with you. We might differ a bit on exactly what concerns us or what we worry about, but there are certainly things in our lives that we worry about. Do I have enough of whatever, money, food, status? Will I live a long or a short life? Do I measure up to others? What's the window dressing of my life? And do I have the status that I want? And in the midst of all that, as we continue our series, He Said What? Embracing the teachings of Jesus, we come to this passage in Matthew chapter 6 where Jesus says, don't be anxious. Don't worry about things. Let's turn to the text, Matthew 6, 25 through 34. Jesus says this, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his lifespan? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon, in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so loves the grass of the field, which today is here and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you? O you of little faith. Therefore, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore, don't be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And truly, reading these words of Jesus might inspire a question. Wait, are you really saying, are you really serious that we can live without worry, that we can live without anxiety? And there are 3 things that Jesus details in this text that people worry about, that he exhorts them to stop worrying about. One is whether they'll have enough food and drink to stay alive. 2, will I have the clothes or the right clothes to wear? And 3, when am I going to die? What's going to happen in the future? And Jesus answers these concerns quite simply. First, God feeds the birds, so why do you think he won't feed you? Second, God creatively clothes creation, so why do you think he won't clothe you? And third, God is the author of life and death. So why do you worry about the length of your life? That's not going to add any length to it. And so we see in this text the call of Christ to live free and easy, free from anxiety and worry. And one of the questions we might want to ask ourselves is, which gospel are we living by? the gospel of the kingdom of God or the gospel of America or the gospel of consumerism? We all probably fall prey to those last ones. You know, when Jesus is speaking these words, he's addressing an issue 2,000 years ago that needs to be addressed in our culture right now, in America, 2,000 years later. And it's not just American culture that's a consumer culture. We see it in many places in the world. But the gospel of America, maybe the gospel of consumerism is this: the more you have, the happier you're going to be. And we can relate to this, can't we? We can talk about this in terms of what we own and how does this relate to us in terms of specific things. Well, it can relate to us in terms of the cars we drive. It can be the clothes we wear. It can be the house that we live in. Maybe it's the toys or the leisure equipment that we buy. Not that those things are wrong, but we just need to ask the question, what drives our acquisition of stuff? Is it a sense of status that we derive from it, or at least we think we derive from it? What's driving us to own things? What does having things do for you? Why do you buy the brand that you buy? Last week, Sharon and I were over in the Seattle area. We were coming back and we got behind a Jaguar SUV. And it created this really interesting conversation with us about why would somebody have a Jaguar SUV versus a Toyota SUV? It's not bigger. It probably, doesn't have more storage space. But what drives that decision? And in the end, we have to work through our own process of why we're acquiring things and not judge other people for their choices. We don't know their life. We don't know their circumstances. But we need to be careful that we don't allow the things that we have to become our identity. John Mark Comer, in his book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which if you haven't read, I really encourage you to grab this book and read it. It's a very good read. It's really accessible. It's quick to move through, but it's really helpful in a lot of ways. But he writes this: for a lot of people, things aren't just things. They're identities. And so maybe if your stuff is your identity or if it's not. And if you're not sure about it, maybe it could be helpful to go through the mental exercise of asking how you would feel, or maybe how you think others would feel about you if you didn't have what you have. But what is the invitation? What's Jesus asking? The invitation, and actually here in the first part of this text, in verse 25, it is a command to stop being anxious about what we eat and wear and about our physical life. When Jesus says, don't be anxious for your life, he's talking really about two things when he's talking about life. First, he's talking about your height or your stature, like your physical being. So perhaps what you look like. Eugene Peterson paraphrases this nicely when he says this: has anyone, by fussing in front of a mirror, ever gotten taller by so much as an inch? So we worry sometimes about what we look like, and we wish we looked like something else. Maybe we wish we were taller. Maybe we wish we were shorter. We wish we had different eyes or different colors of eyes or hair or something. And Jesus says, don't get consumed with that. That's not helpful. But the second thing he talks about is, when he's talking about life, is really the length of your life. The word life here is your actual physical life. This is the same word that Paul uses in 1 Corinthians 15 to distinguish your natural body, that's your life, your soulish body, the one you were born with and lived this life in, from your spiritual body, or the one that you'll have in the resurrection. And the biggest difference is how those bodies are animated, and that's a sermon for another day. But he's talking about your actual physical life in this moment, here and now. And it's important that we steward our bodies well. Jesus isn't saying abuse your body, don't take care of it. But don't be consumed with it. Don't be consumed with how you look. Don't be consumed with the length of your life. It's important to keep that in clear perspective. And so when he says don't be anxious, the word anxious here conveys mere planning without the notion of anxiety. So while Jesus is not saying don't decide what you're going to eat and don't decide what you're going to wear and don't neglect your physical life, he is saying don't let your life, the stuff that you have, who you are, and the length of your life consume you. When we let the concern of those things consume us and occupy our minds, then we live with a type of care or anxiety that distracts us, and it divides our allegiance from Christ. We let that become our focus. And we see this really clearly in Jesus' rebuke of Martha in Luke chapter 10, verse 41. Remember, it says this, but the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, why are you anxious and troubled about many things? Martha was busy about the things, and she goes to Jesus and said, ask Mary to help me. And Jesus said, don't let your life become consumed by all this little stuff around you, the food and taking care of the house and all this stuff. Pay attention to me. That's the key thing to do. Don't become troubled or anxious about many things. And so in verse 25, we get the present imperative in the Greek language, a command not to allow the habit of worry about food and clothing, or even our physical stature and length of life, to consume us and distract us from God's kingdom, which is eternal. He's calling us to look at something higher. But it's not just about stuff. Christ's call is also to live free of anxiety about what we cannot control, namely the future. Christ's call is to live free of anxiety about what we cannot control. In verse 31 of this text, we get an exhortation or an encouragement not to start doing something. Rather than a command to stop it, it's an exhortation to not start it. A good translation is do not become anxious about tomorrow, or do not grow anxious about tomorrow, because tomorrow is outside of your control. It'll take care of itself at some level. Jesus says, don't be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And again, it seems important to say that Jesus isn't exhorting us to not make prudent decisions about the future. But there's a lot in the future we can't control. We don't know what's going to happen. We get the same challenge really from the brother of Jesus, James, who writes in chapter 4, verses 13 through 17, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you don't know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. And as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it's sin. Don't fill up your plans so completely that there's no room for God's movement, because you don't know what the future holds. And so Christ's call is an invitation into an eternal kingdom, a transcendent kingdom. So we can let go of those things that are simply outside of our control. Don't let our minds become caught up in them and consumed by them. And we can live freely and lightly as we follow Jesus. In Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of Matthew chapter 11, verse 30, he says this, keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly, free from anxiety, free from worry. That's the call. And in some ways, it's a call to live simply. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 10, we get this beautiful exhortation about getting caught up in the desires of the world. And we have this invitation to live in simplicity. Paul writes to Timothy, but godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not money is the root of all evil, but the love of it, that it consumes us to have it, to have more things, to have more stuff. And so the question that I want to invite us to think about is, how do we push back the tide against worry about all the things that we have? What are the ways that we can live simply, freely, lightly, as we walk out our existence in this world, as we live as Jesus calls us to, free from anxiety and worry? Well, partly we have to deal with our stuff. We have to deal with the stuff that we actually have. William Morris, an English designer, said this, have nothing in your houses that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful. I think that's fascinating. Have nothing in your house that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful. How much stuff do you hold on to that's neither useful nor beautiful? It's just stuff. It's the stuff that you have. Peter Kraft has a little book that's titled letters to our children, before I go, letters to our children about what really matters. And he gives a list of what matters in the order that they matter. The first thing that matters is God. The second thing that matters is spouse. The third thing that matters is kids. The fourth thing that matters is yourself. Remember, you have to put on your own oxygen mask before you can help someone else. The fifth thing is friends. The sixth thing is everything else in the world, everyone else you know. The seventh thing is the world that we live in. We're called to be stewards of it. And the eighth thing on the list is things. And he defines it this way: money, the things money can buy, houses, cars, and vacations, stuff. Always people before things. Use things and love people, not vice versa. And so we have to deal with our stuff. How much stuff do we have that's neither useful nor beautiful? Stuff that we don't use. Our closets are full of it. Our garages are full of it. Our storage units are full of it. What can we do about taking care of, decluttering from the stuff that we have and getting rid of the things that we don't need and that don't make our lives better? It frees us from the worry and anxiety of keeping those things. Maybe another thing to do about your stuff is before you buy something, ask, what's the true cost of this item? You know, the cost of owning something isn't only calculated by what it costs to buy it. We have to think about the cost of owning something, first in terms of what it costs to buy it. Secondly, what it costs to maintain it. But thirdly, what it costs us in time to use it. Do you own things that you never use? And if you actually took the time to use them, do you have the time for that? And so we sometimes buy things that put stress on us to use our time in ways that we can't really do it. So the cost of owning a thing is buying it, maintaining it, and the time it takes to actually use it. If you buy an RV and you don't use it, then it's a waste of your money. Or if you buy an RV and by using it, you're taking your time away from things you should be doing, then you're spending money, you're spending time and energy and resources that you shouldn't be. That's not to say having an RV is a wrong thing. Not at all. You just have to count the cost of that. What does it cost to own it? What's it cost to buy it, to maintain it, and what does it cost to use it? And if we thought about that a little bit more, we might make some different decisions. As we think about stuff, I love what Peter Foster says in The Celebration of Discipline. He says, refuse to be propagandized by the custodians of modern gadgetry. Do you have to have the newest iPhone or the newest iPad right when it comes out, the newest tech gadget? I'm actually not caught up in tech gadgets. I don't really like technology very much. I use it only as much as I need to for my purposes. I do get caught up in kitchen gadgets, though. I really like kitchen gadgets. And so, do I really need those things? Do I have to have that thing in my kitchen? Most of the stuff tends to just end up cluttering the countertops. And so as you think about the stuff that you own, is it useful? Is it beautiful? What's the cost of actually owning it? Are you just buying it because it's the newest thing out? It's important to think about that. And then what about what you eat? Here's an interesting thing that might be fun for you to try. What about just eating the same things every day for a week? So what about eating the same thing for breakfast every day for a week? Maybe for us, sometimes we have breakfast smoothie. What if we just decided that every day for the next week, we're eating that same breakfast smoothie? We're not going to have to decide about what should we eat for breakfast. Or what about for dinner? We eat the same thing every night for dinner. Maybe we eat two things and we change those things out. I remember some years back when I was in Kosovo, we were doing some work there, some mission work there, and we were staying in this kind of hostel that the bottom floor of it was a little restaurant, and we would go down there for meals. And for breakfast every day, it was rice and eggs. For lunch every day, it was rice and eggs. And for dinner every day, it was rice and eggs and chicken. You have to make sure you eat eggs more than you eat chicken. Otherwise, it doesn't work. But I remember in that moment thinking how simple it was, and it was fine. We got along just fine. We ate the same things all the time. We didn't spend any time wondering about, there was no time spent wondering about what you were going to order on the menu. You knew what you were going to get. And so what would it be like to simplify our routine for a menu? Maybe it's to eat the same meals on Mondays and Tuesdays, so you just build a bit of a pattern. How could you simplify? We live on the basis of choices, and we like to eat lots of varieties of things, but it's not that helpful in terms of our time. And then what about wearing the same clothes? Like, in less affluent cultures, they wear fewer clothes. They had fewer outfits. Again, in this book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer talks about simplifying his life. And here's what he says about clothing. He said, I decided to limit myself to 6 outfits per season. 1 for every day of the week, with Sunday as a choose your own adventure day. I literally had an outfit schedule on the inside of my closet door. If you saw me on Monday, I was wearing my gray sweatshirt and black jeans. Now, Comer has since, according to the book, limited himself to 3 outfits per season and only 2 in the summer. He doesn't spend any time in his closet saying, boy, I wonder what I'm going to wear today. It's Wednesday. I know what I'm going to wear. And so when we think about stuff, we understand that it means taking some thought about what we have. When we talk about food, maybe we can simplify what we're doing. When we talk about our clothing, maybe we can simplify what we're doing. We don't need all the clothes that we have, most of us at least. And then maybe we just come back to Paul's admonition in Philippians chapter 4, to live as Jesus calls us to live, freely and lightly. In Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 9, Paul says, don't be anxious about anything, but bring everything back to prayer and live in God's peace. Let God be over your life and set your mind on the right values, whatever is true and honorable and just and pure and lovely, commendable, excellent, and worthy of praise. Think about those things, Paul says. Christ is calling us to a different kingdom, a kingdom with a wholly different economy than the kingdom of this world. A kingdom in which stuff doesn't matter because it's all going to end up in the trash heap at the end. A kingdom in which status doesn't matter because in this kingdom, the highest value is to live what might be considered the lowliest life, the life of a servant. Christ is calling us into a kingdom in which our very lives, our physical life in this world, isn't something we should worry about because we don't die. Jesus said in John chapter 11, 25 and 26, I'm the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. And so Christ is calling us into this eternal kingdom. And he tells us, don't worry about stuff. Don't worry about stature. Don't worry about status. And don't worry about staying around here because there's more to come. And so some questions for reflection. Are you caught up in the cares of the world in this moment? What are the cares that you're caught up in? What are the things that bother you? What are the things that make you anxious or that you worry about? Is it how you look? Is it your physical life? Is it what you have? And then can you begin to simplify? Where could you start? What 2 things could you do in the next week to start to simplify your life? Maybe it's making a menu. Maybe it's deciding what clothes you're going to wear. Thinking about that. Can you begin to live in the kingdom? If you're not, and if you already are, then there you go. But this is an opportunity to grow, to live simply and freely. I pray that God blesses you as you go into this endeavor, that you would find him to be enough as you walk forward into the days ahead of you. God bless.